Jack Allen. I'm 81 years old.
Okay. And of course you know a little bit about the project. You brought in some great pictures. I'd like to get an idea of how you feel personally about participating in the project and kind of what it means to you.
I think it's very important, and and when this first came up, I was very excited over the fact that we could tell you what we felt like. We have been treated with extreme courtesies from everyone I've ever seen of Korean background. And I've said to many people that were the situation reversed, I'm sure we would be very thankful of those who came to help us. And we've been to a number of Korean events, and without exception, we have been treated royally. And so when he came back and said that the only problem we had, those of us at the Korean War Veterans Group, is how are you going to finance this thing? I mean, this is crazy. There's so many people, and who I am sure are willing to talk about what it was like and what went on. How do we finance? So he came back with the thought that the Korean government is willing to underwrite this, and I think that's fantastic. I really do. I don't know how, I have no difficulty talking about it. I remember when I first started talking about it, and I remember the day my sister said to me a number of times, I never talked about when I was in Korea, and I have a great deal of feeling for people who something they can't talk about. And I called Joe Owens one day. There was an article in the paper about they were collecting money for the chosen few and who the chosen few were. And his mother said he had gone to get a paper and she'd have him call me back. Well, he did. And so we got talking, and I started crying. And he kept saying to me, that's okay, that's okay. And I had never talked about it.
So this was the first time you...
This is the first time I'd ever talked about it. This is, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. And the more I talked about it, after talking to him, I was able to talk about it then. And as time went on, I talked to one of my sons and told him what I did. And he had no idea. And my sisters had no idea. But it was an experience and a half. I said earlier that we had gone off to the Mediterranean in, I think it was April, and we transferred from another company, another battalion headquarters, to the battalion that was going, and so we did, and we left there in April and went to the Mediterranean, and sometime in, I think it was June, that the war broke out, and they extended us for a year, and we went through the Suez Canal and around on to Japan, where we were going to regroup because we had been aboard ship. And so we did that. I'll never forget our communications officer. We were going into wherever, I forget where we were landing, but they were going to unload the ship and combat load it, which means take everything off, and the thing that you need the least goes on first, and until you get to a point of where the most important thing is the last thing put on. But my comm officer said to me, I want you to go up to, I think it was the, I don't know if it, I forget, near Osaka, Japan. There was a division had been there who were in Korea. So he said, take a couple Jeeps, whatever wire you need and everything, and set up a telephone system, because when you get unloaded, we're all coming up there. So we went up there, and they had a dial system. So we had nothing to do, but we drank more milk, and we had more fun.
Mhm.
And then 2 days later, the guys all came up. They'd been working their buns off, and we were up there. Luckily, it didn't have to do it. Well, then, so we stayed there for, I don't know, about 3 or 4 weeks. And then when the Incheon landing took place, we were the reserve aboard ship. And we're standing there and we're watching these guys going in, and we're all saying, who chose them to go? Why couldn't we be the ones to go in there? And as I look back on it, I probably wouldn't say that today. But then we were all mad because we were in the reserve and we weren't the first ones to go in. And so we went in the next day, and it was different. We're walking up the road, a dirt road, in each of the tracks, and we hear a whir. We could hear the gun. We could hear the booming. That was a different feeling. I mean,
What was that like?
this is serious stuff. We ain't messing around now. We'd been on. See, I'd been in the military for 3 years at that point, and we had been on the maneuvers a couple times, but that was always fake stuff. So
Yes.
we're walking along, and all of a sudden we hear like a bird flying, except that we look ahead and everybody on the road has jumped off into the side. Well, let me tell you, we couldn't jump fast enough because we could hear it coming probably 10 miles ahead of us, and this is the real stuff. So we did. The funny part of it was one of the guys had a bunch of telephones and wires with him, and he jumped and he landed in a hole that turned out to be where an outhouse had been.
Oh no.
And he was up to hearing it, and he's screaming bloody murder. I'll never forget it because he's having an awful time. I mean, we just went ashore, and he's up to his eyeballs in this, and he couldn't get his clothes and everything off fast enough.
I wonder if he had known that was an outhouse, if
he
he
would
have
never
stayed
have.
on the road. or if he
You're
would've
right.
just
You're right.
fit.
Well, I don't know how much wire we left, but it was a mess. But we went on, and I guess it was a couple of days later that we moved up to the front, and we went from there to Kimpo Airfield, and I remember going in there, and we took that back from the North Koreans. And then we moved on to Seoul, where we were above the city looking down, and it was just shambles.
And when was this? Month and year?
Oh, this had to be, it was September 15th, I think it was, at the Incheon landing.
Mm-hmm.
And it had to be not more than 2 or 3 days after that. Of course, you got to remember that when the Incheon landing took place, the North Koreans were all the way down to Busan, almost to Busan, and General MacArthur, who put together this idea, it was one of these, you can't do it, but we got to do it type of things. And when we landed, it cut the supply lines of the North Koreans that were south of us, and they were in dire straits then because we were behind them. They couldn't get any supplies now. We could cut them off and do anything we wanted to do. They'd starve them to death. They couldn't get ammunition. They couldn't get food. They couldn't get anything except what they got from themselves right there. And so I think it was easy that we went through Kimpo Airfield, and they got out of there. When we got over to Seoul, we didn't know how far away Seoul was from Kimpo. I mean, we're doing what we're told to do, and the next thing you know, we're sitting on a hillside looking down. And of course, being telephone people, we always stayed we were assigned to a line company. In my case, it was H Company, Howe Company, that we were assigned with. And when we'd start out in the morning, we would find out from the company commander how far we were going to that day and what were the plans of where they were going to stop. And we would get enough wire and enough telephones to, when they stopped for the night, we would string the wires back to the battalion headquarters, and now we had telephone connections, And at that time, they used to have radios that you were on different frequencies. And anybody could listen to it if they could find the right frequency. But when we had a telephone that had a line, a wire line, we could talk with anybody at headquarters, vice versa.
So that's why it's so important to.
And that's right, and no one knew that what we were saying. I remember saying to my son that we would usually late in the afternoon, they would settle down for where they're going to be at that night. We would then go to the company commander, they would tell us their stop, and we would hook up a telephone, and we'd start laying a line back to where battalion headquarters was. And it would be after dark, and we'd go back, and there'd be 2 or 3 of us that would go back to check the line, because if somebody cut it or someone tapped into it, they could listen to what we were talking about. So we'd go back, and we'd have it in our hand, and we knew where we'd put it. It was kind of scary, but we'd go back to battalion headquarters, and we'd see a bunch of guys that we knew that were friends with us, and we'd chit-chat with them for a while. But then we had to turn around and go back to the rifle company, and now we got to go back the other way. And now it's important because we've got to be sure that someone hasn't tapped into that line or cut it. And so we'd have to follow the line that we had, and if we found somebody that had tapped into it, we had to unhook it. And my son said to me, well, did you go find out where these guys were doing it? And I said, no. We weren't looking for them. We would try our best to take the wire that they'd hooked in and cut it up and then hide it, throw it away, and then change where our line was so that they couldn't find it again. I mean, this is after dark. And so if we could do that, we knew that we were safe.
So it's kind of like a cat and mouse
It was.
game.
Yep.
So
And when he said, did you grab it? I said, hey, I don't know who's out there. There may be 100 guys, there may be 1 million of them, maybe only 1 or 2, but I don't want to know that because he don't want me around either.
Yeah.
And so we'd go back, and then we'd stay the rest of the night with them, and then the next day, when we started out again, it was just another hop, skip, and jump to where we were going. And so we did this for a number of days, and then we got up to Seoul, and then Seoul was taken back. And as it turned out then, the programs changed because they were going to take us back out from there to go around to the other side of Korea and go up into North Korea. And I'll never forget, this Red Shawl was a friend of mine. He was a radio man. We were laying we were waiting for the ship to come in. We were laying there, and I said, you know, this would be great. I mean, a nice sunny day, and we're just laying there, and I said, wouldn't this be something if we were out on a hunting trip?
Yeah.
What would you do? He said, I'd pack up and go home. And we laughed over that. I got to know Red then, and that became a very interesting relationship over the years. But we did. We went back to I guess it was Incheon, and went aboard ship, went around and got off at Wonsan, I guess it was. And then we got on a train, and we were going north into the mountains. And it was amazing to me because you look at it, you're on a road, and it would go straight up on one side and straight down on the other side, and you say, wow, don't up over here, you're going to be way down there. I mean, this is big mountains. And we kept getting farther north, and it was getting colder and colder all the time. Now this was in November, and we hadn't even got there yet. And we were running into little pockets of people here and there, and then one day we found that we were the farthest north company that had been in Korea. And we took turns going ahead and walking off to the side, so we were each, for a little while, the northernmost person in all of Korea. And it was kind of interesting because we're going through hills and fields, and it was crazy. I remember a couple of things as we were going up there, and I had it in one of these pictures. Several companies were ahead of us fighting, and they come on a little hill that had, they were hiding in caves or holes in the ground where they would have tunnels between, and so they could hide in them, and when we went past or got there, they could jump up and crucify us. And I'll never forget, we were going along, and there was a hill probably 200 yards ahead of us, that these guys were all, they found a place where there were a lot of holes, a lot of caves where the North Koreans had dug into. And being out of sight, you'd go on past and wouldn't think about it, but they caught on to it, and all of a sudden they ran out of hand grenades.
Oh, yeah.
And so the word came back they needed hand grenades. And I have no idea why. I never could fathom why I volunteered to take a case of hand grenades up to these guys.
You wanted to help them out.
Hey, you're going up there. You're right in the middle of it now. You're.
So you wanted to be in the action. Then.
Well, I guess that was it. I knew they needed it, so up I go with this big box of hand grenades, and I got up there, and guys were all around, and they'd find one, they'd shoot into it, or they would drop a grenade in it, and it would kill somebody. And I got up there, and this Marine stopped, and he looked at me, and he aimed his rifle at me. And you could tell by the look in his eyes that he was gone. He went over. He went out.
The stress of the...
He just didn't know where he was, what he was doing, and I was somebody coming in that he didn't know. And about 3 guys kept hollering at him to put his gun down. And I just stood there for a minute because I wasn't going to move. And a couple of guys went up. One guy grabbed his rifle, and another guy took him away. I'll never forget the look in his eyes. He just had lost his whole mind. He was just, he'd hit it. And
why do you think that happened?
He'd been shooting too many people. I mean, this is not fun games. This is big stuff. He just got to a point where his mind broke. He was out of his mind. And I was so forever grateful that these guys, they saw him. And every now and then this would happen. Every now and then it would happen to somebody, and what could you do? Nothing. You ship him back and send him to a hospital.
What were the thoughts going through your mind when that happened? You're like, if I'm going to go out, I don't want to...
I'm not going to move. I'm not going to move. And I was forever grateful that these guys saw what happened. Because I think if I'd moved, I'd have been gone. Mm-hmm. He didn't know what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And anyhow, they took the hand grenades and they cleaned out this area, and we went on. And that was an experience, though, that I will never forget. And so we moved on, and then did a couple more days, and then we finally got up. This is toward the end of November, and I don't know how many days difference it was, but we'd gone north, and we were on this ridge, and this is a rifle company ahead of us, and they were ahead of us, and they had set up on this ridge that went down the hill, and it was quite a steep but long mountain down, and they had several machine gun set up on this edge. It must have been around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. We had heard this earlier, but we could hear whistles and bells and drums and hollering, and we knew there was somebody down there, and we debated on getting out of our sleeping bag. I mean, it was cold. So we finally did, and they attacked. It had to be close to midnight, and it was the Chinese, and they came up and overran us. They went through. The next day, you could look down that mountain and you could see it looked like cordwood of bodies that they had come into an incredible place, because there were about 4 or 5 machine guns that would just cut them down, and it was.
So they just had so many people come in.
And they overrun us.
Yeah.
They went over the hill beyond us, and now we're glad, obviously, that we got out of our sleeping bags. I saw a guy with his bayonet tearing up my sleeping bag. And then they went back over the hill to regroup, and as they did this, this guy threw a concussion grenade. I can never forget it come bouncing by me, and it blew up. And I was wounded in my right, it cut a nerve in my arm, and which caused me to have no feeling in my right arm. And I had another piece that hit me in my knee, and I couldn't walk. And I had speckles of it all over the side of my face and my right side or left side, but they were all small pieces. And but I became quite fearful because we were concerned about freezing, and I didn't want my arm to get frozen because I couldn't feel anything in it. And so the company commander said, "Get all the guys that are wounded and get them out of here." And then the next morning, they moved a whole bunch of us outside. They had straw left on the ground and they covered with a tarp. And we were all laying on the tarp, and they were loading all of us 2 at a time under a helicopter. And they put me in a wire basket, put me on the side of the helicopter, strapped me in, and I'm looking up and I'm thinking, I hope this thing flies. And there was one on each side of it. And I think I was one of the last 2 guys that got out of there. And it took us back about 10 miles back. And we waited there for a while, and then they moved us to another town a couple of miles farther back, and where there was a large airstrip. They could put us in a twin engine, I don't know what it was, plane that took us to Japan.
To a hospital?
To a hospital. And funny part of that was, we were in this, there were so many injured coming back. There were hundreds, literally hundreds of people wounded. There were companies that we had that out of 200 or 300 people, maybe there were 20 that were still survived. The one thing I will always say, I was in the Marine Corps, and we knowingly did not leave anyone behind. And I thought more times, God, it could have happened that they could just run off and left me, but they didn't. And we went into a tent, and we were all in a big tent, and we're all laying on the ground. And this priest came in, and he said, "How you doing, guys?" And nobody said much, yeah. And so he said, "I think we could say the Lord's Prayer." I will never forget this. We were at the disposal of God. We could do nothing. Whatever he wanted to do with us, he could have done. I never forgot that. And it's been, I will never forget that, because that's the closest I ever came to not surviving. I always said, I don't know what he has in mind for me, but
he wanted you here.
He saved us that day. And so then they flew us back to Japan, put us in an army hospital. And I'll never forget, I was there in a hospital bed, and this nurse came in, and she was going to give me a tetanus shot. Well, the tetanus shot, you put it in the hind end, so I had to turn over. And she said, "Well, this is going to hurt for a minute." I said, I knew it, but I knew you had to have a tetanus shot where I'd get poisoned with any of the metal I had in me. So she laid the needle on my hind end and skidded it along until it caught and went in. I said, "Where did you learn to give a tetanus shot?" "This is the first one I ever gave," she says.
After she gives it.
I said, let me show you how you do this. I said, just slap them hard and jab the needle in before the sting is gone. And oh my gosh, she said, nobody ever taught me how to do this.
Yeah, like that hurt worse than the
Oh,
concussion
that was
grenade
terrible. You know it's going to catch pretty soon. A needle's going to, and so But then we stayed there for, I guess we were there about a week or 10 days, and what was happening, there were a lot of wounded people going back to the United States. And so they were putting people up with a 6 or 8 hour time where you could go, they'd take you off to send you to the airport or where you're going. And they found out there were 6 of us that were Marines in an Army hospital. Well, they couldn't be in an Army hospital, so they took us and shipped us back to Yokosuka Naval Hospital.
Why wouldn't they want the Marines in the Army hospital?
Well, we were Marines. We weren't Army. We were Marines.
They have to keep the branches separate?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I understand.
want to.
I said, hey, we got a bunch of Marines. You guys are supposed to be in the Naval Hospital, so we got to move you. So they did, and we were already on the 24-hour time when we could have come back, but we didn't make it, and that's okay. We went back to Yokosuka Naval Hospital. We walked in this hospital. There were bodies, people laying down. Their hands were frozen. You could take some people and snap their fingers off it. They were frozen so badly. This was about a 25 or 30 bed hospital, and there had to be several hundred.
So what's that like to see all this, suffering and pain? I mean, it must have been kind of hit you pretty hard.
You had, oh God, it's hard to imagine some of these poor guys that were really in bad shape. I mean, really in bad shape. I didn't know at that time what was wrong with my arm, except I had no feeling. But some of these guys had lost arms and fingers and toes, and it was a very tragic thing to see. And ultimately, they kept me there, and a neurosurgeon repaired the nerve in my arm. He didn't do anything. I mean, for the rest of it, it was probably 20 years later. I remember a piece of shrapnel came out of my thumb. It took a long time for the feeling to come back, as is true with nerves. And I eventually was shipped back to the United States, went into Oakland Naval Hospital. I got back on the 13th of February, and I called my mother, and it was her birthday.
It's a good birthday present for a mom.
Oh, God, she was the happiest lady the world has ever seen, and I'll never forget that. She'd been worried. She'd gotten a telegram that's in that scrapbook, and she didn't know anything. And then she knew. She didn't know how I was hurt, how bad I was hurt, or anything. She just knew I was hurt, and that nobody was going to tell her anything until the time came. And so.
So she had no idea how badly you were.
Didn't know anything.
Could have.
She just knew I'd been wounded. She didn't know which hand, how badly it was. She didn't know anything. And so, being able to call her, I was an only son. I have 4 older sisters, and that was an experience and a half.
It was kind of getting more dangerous, closer to the line.
That's true.
What was that like? What were you thinking? Was it getting scarier and scarier as time progressed?
No, we really didn't think about that. I think it's the young person feeling. You're untouchable. I don't think I would say that today, but this was over. I'd have to think about it how many weeks, but it was the 28th of November that the Chinese came into the war. We had seen a few of them around. They had been captured, and so as we were getting farther up in the Chosin Reservoir area, we knew that there were Chinese around. Well, General MacArthur said that we were going to go to the Yalu River, which is on the coast of Chinese and of North Korea. And he was ultimately fired because President Truman didn't agree with our going all the way to the Chosin or to the Yalu River, because they kept saying the Chinese are not going to sit there and watch you stop at the side of the river. And yet the pilots that were saving us all the time would not go across the Yalu River. They would chase these Chinese or North Korean planes across the river. They would not cross it, but that's how these guys got away from them. And as time went on, you're right, it got colder and colder and colder, and it was very difficult because the night that we didn't get out of our, the Chinese came in, I remember my boots were in the bottom of my sleeping bag. And when I got them, they were warm and dry. But as I moved from, in my best recollection, a lot of things happened that are fun, and we didn't get any beer over there. I think since that time they've given beer to the Vietnamese or the
we never. Some veterans that I've talked to, they had beer in their camp.
I'm sure they did. Yes, they did. But at that time, all we got, basically what we got was fruit juices. And we wanted, I'm not a beer drinker, but that doesn't mean anything. But why couldn't we get the beer? But we were getting all kinds of, well, one day, somebody, I don't know who it was, got into the medical alcohol and stole a quart of it or something. And they had these big vats that used to mix stuff in. And we had all this stuff poured in there, and we poured all these cans of this fruit juice. And it was pretty good stuff, except if they ever found out who stole the alcohol, that'd been a big problem. That's true. We had a corpsman that was putting some wood on a fire, and he was breaking wood on his knee. He broke his knee. He had to go home. So for the next 3 days, we're all trying to break our knee. Not really, but we're.
Home, guys.
How come he can break his and I can't break mine? But things like that you do. It's interesting. You remember more the good things and the fun times than you do the horror things. Yeah.
I guess that's how you deal with what's going on, to kind of keep going and push ahead.
Yeah, if we had been attacked some night by ourselves when we were out, we'd have been dead in 10 minutes, checking the line back. I remember one of the guys, there was a guy that was dead, North Korean, and all I would think it was his head was sticking out of the side, but he was dead on a doorbell. And this guy was with, all of a sudden he's got his pistol out and he's shooting, he's putting about 5 shells in this guy. We got there and, what'd you kill this guy for? He's been dead for days. And he says, listen, I'm not going to ask questions. I saw this guy's head. I saw this guy standing there. I didn't know that he was dead yet. And so you got in a frame of mind that you didn't mess around. There were times to, and there was times not to. And it was very, you became hardened more as time went on. But at the same time, you knew we had a job to do. I think of the time I took the grenades up. Hey, somebody had to do it. The quicker they did it, the quicker we could get out of here, the quicker we could go on and go on safely. And so I've often thought, what possessed me to do that? But we were of the mind that our lives were at stake. A lot of guys' lives were at stake, and so we did what we had to do.
So it's not only just this, whatever actions you have to do for self-preservation, but it's also almost like you have this brotherhood, so you have to care for your fellow Marine. That's
true, and very true, and that goes back to when I first joined. I don't even know why I joined the Marine Corps. I enlisted. I wanted to enlist before I was 18. My mother would not sign for me, so I waited 2 more weeks and joined on my own. We went to boot camp. We got out of boot camp. They shipped me and several other guys to a telephone school out in California, and we were there for several months. There was a big ravine. It was where the Del Mar racetrack is now, and I never knew that in just recent years. But there was a big ravine, and if we goofed around or anything, they had a wall there where they'd throw this net over it, and for punishment, they would make us go over the side. Well, what they really were doing was making us do something we ultimately did when we went ashore at Incheon. We went over the side of the ship, went down a net, got in the boats, and we had done it so many times, those of us that were telephone guys had. We didn't lose our rifle or our helmet or something like that. So we didn't break our neck getting caught in the net. We had been learned that if we goofed up in class or something, you were going to be going over the side down in the ravine a few dozen times. But it was good practice for us, and so we were all pretty much, I mean, we were lucky because we had done a lot of this. I can't express enough the camaraderie we had as Marines, and I'm not saying this disparaging anybody else, any other service or anything else, except that we all were one of a kind. We all had a job to do. Marines, everyone's a rifleman. They have specialties, we do all kinds of things, but bottom line is, if the time comes, we are riflemen. And the night I took over from that switchboard, he knew what he was doing, I knew what he was doing, and I went there out of habit. Didn't think about whether he wanted to go or not. He knew what his job was, and I knew what mine was, and I knew how to run the switchboard with only one hand. And so that never entered my mind in the time. But in this process, you get a feeling that you can rely on any of the guys, because they'll do exactly what you will do if you have to do it. And Joe Owen is a good example of that. Oh my God. Well, Howe Company lost 3 company commanders that night. 3 guys were killed and replaced. And new guy came in knowing full well what was happening. Did he hesitate? Not for a second. And there's a camaraderie that has never left me.
You knew you could depend on each other.
Yes, yes, and we would not leave somebody behind. We would not help them. And I've taken you through, I don't know how many weeks. We went in the 15th or 16th of September, and this is the end of November. So it's October, November, it was 2.5 months. But this is what you remember, because this is what you were there for. I can remember when we were coming in, when we were getting ready to leave Seoul to go back and go up Wonsan, up into North Korea, there was a consideration that they might go north with a truck convoy to go all the way across to Panmunjom, which was the North Korean capital, and to a surprise take over that city. That would be a terrible blow to the North Koreans to have their capital city now in the hands of the South Koreans or of the military. And we didn't do it. I was surprised at that. I was at a meeting at 2 o'clock in the morning when they were talking about doing this. I don't know why we did not, but there was lots of thoughts about how we were going to do what we were going to do. And as we went north into the chosen area, I never did see a reservoir. We were close, but never did see one. But obviously it was all ice, and you didn't run around too much there. It was so cold to sit down and heat up. It was all canned food. You try to warm it up, and you can't. We'd carry it under your arms. You'd carry it, I mean, wherever you could do it to make it edible. It was just, I think you condition yourself to the conditions that you're in. If we'd been having a fun time in the sun, we probably wouldn't have felt that way, but we went farther north, and it got continuously colder. And so we had to do with what we had.
So you adjust to what you have to adjust to.
Yes. The guys that goofed around paid for it. I was very fortunate. I didn't get frozen feet, toes. There are still guys that are feeling the pain of that. I know several who have lost fingers that were just black. They were frozen so badly. It was a tragedy. It was horrible. And you come to realize this, and you didn't joke about it. This was real. And I think of today, some of these guys are over there. It's got to be horror. It's got to be horror. And yet a guy said to me, the stuff that I had is obsolete. We used to have telephone. Everybody's got a cell phone now. Guy says 30 seconds you can get help. We didn't have that. We had a telephone with hook a wire on it and string the wire.
Minutes, hours you're waiting.
Yeah. I didn't know about it for a long time, but it was an international brotherhood that somehow got started of anybody who was on, at, or over the Chosin Reservoir during November and December of 1950.
Specifically because the conditions were so bad?
Well, you got to remember now, after the Chinese came in, they were going to annihilate. They had like 3 or 4 divisions of Chinese that were going to annihilate the Marines that were up there. And I don't know which general it was. Somebody said the Marines never retreat, and the guy said, "Retreat, hell! We're just attacking in a different direction." And that's what happened. Getting us out of there who couldn't walk got us out of the way so that they had the ability to do what they had to do. And so everybody went back and regrouped in their companies. Oh boy. And orders are given, we're going back. And they're not going to wipe us out. And we did. I didn't. I was not on that. That was probably the worst, but it was the most famous battle I think the Marines have ever been in. Everybody was walking. Those who got wounded on the way got on a truck, but they turned and started back down, and they had several. I mean, remember the mountains went like this and down, and there was a road, and it was straight down from there, and there were several places where they blew up the bridges that went across some breaker. Well, how do you can't take a truck across that. And so they had to fix that. And so they did. And they came out of it to the everlasting glory that we got everyone out of there. There were Chinese on all the high ground. To get to some of these guys, you had to go through 4 feet of snow. And guys did that. Because they were being shot at from somebody above, and they didn't know where they were until they started shooting. I don't even know how many miles it was, but they brought them all back, and it was an amazing march. Come back down there. I was so lucky that I wasn't on it. I mean, that had to be another 2 weeks of total horror. I mean, you've got somebody that's bound and determined to wipe you out, but they didn't. And when they got down to
the leadership of and the dedication, and also.
That's true. Well, the thing that was interesting, there was an army group that was to the west of us, and I forget who the generals were, but the general that was with the army was critical of the general of the Marines farther to right because we were taking our trucks with us. And to which the general said, "We need the trucks to carry our supplies." And they said, "You don't need the trucks, you're getting into a tough area." Well, as it turned out, we got out better than they did because we had vehicles with which to turn around and get out of there as fast as we could. And when they got down to, I don't know if it was Wonsan or where it was, but there were ships were waiting. They took out thousands of military, but they also took out a large number of South Koreans that wanted to get out of there. And I wasn't there for that, but I've heard a lot about it, and am I surprised at it? No. I was just lucky that I didn't have to go through that suffering, fighting all my way back to where I came from. And that was probably the most wonderful battle that there ever was. Was it easy? No. Awful lot of guys died. Awful lot of people got hurt. But the chosen few is made up of, there were some Turkish people, there were some, oh my gosh, it's an international group. But at the same time, it's a last man standing group. At some point in our life, the last guy who became a member of the chosen few is going to die. We don't know when, don't know who, how many there are. But I've never been in a group like that. You had 2 months to be there, and if you were there, you're a member of the chosen few. And I have some pictures of a group of us that get together a couple times a year. What do we have in common? We were there when it was really big. That's right. Nobody else can join, and yet there's no refusal, whether you're in Turkey or Great Britain or Italy or wherever you were from. And there were a lot of other. It's an international group, but we all know, and it's becoming more well aware of it as time goes on. I mean, here it's been 60 years since that happened. A lot of guys have died out. A lot of people are getting older. I'm 81, and I was one of the younger guys that was there. And my wife tells me I go to Korean War veterans meeting, and she says, "You're one of the youngest guys that was there." Well, I probably was, but I'm not so young now. But those that were in the chosen few, I don't know how fast, but there's a lot of them going every day.
Well, hopefully you sitting here gives an opportunity for the memory to live on.
We all say we'll have a bottle and we'll drink to the rest of you. And so it got to a point of where the chosen few I am a member of the Northeast area. We're seriously concerned with that. Because guys are, every 2 months we get a letter that says so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so is gone. And how many years? I don't know. But I was very proud to be a member of that group. Well, the thing that, I don't know how many years it was, I never talked about my experience in Korea. My sisters all said to me, "You never told us anything about what went on." And I didn't. And it wasn't until I talked to Joe Owens and it started coming out.
Was it like a weight coming off of your shoulders once you first started talking about it? Like you were almost carrying around this...
I guess so, yeah.
Burden.
Yeah, yes. It's interesting thing happened several years ago on not Memorial Day, but anyhow, at church, they were going to have a bunch of war veterans talk about their experiences. And it must have been, I was over at the War Memorial, and there was a group of us there, and I went over, I told them I was going to be late, and I had the uniform on. We have a blue jacket, ribbons, and black pants, a black tie, and so I went over to the church from the War Memorial, and there were 6 or 7 guys in there that had been talking to. It's a kind of a forum that we would have after church, talking about their experience in the military. And one guy was crying, and he's older than I am, And I had a feeling right then that he had not really, he'd been in, I don't know if it was Vietnam or World War II, but I had a feeling that he had not talked about this, had not overcome this. And we talked about it for a while afterwards. It's easy for me to talk about it once you come to face with what you went through, and somebody up there was looking out for you. But over time, I lived with it. I mean, once I got out.
So why do you think you didn't want to talk about it, or other veterans didn't want to talk about it? It's something that you just kind of wanted to forget about?
Well, I've always thought, and I still think of it to this day. I didn't ask to do this. I joined the Marine Corps. It happened during my tour of duty. I don't remember, by virtue of the job that I had, a lot of guys were in an outfit that they knew the guys for years. And so they go to a convention and they see all these guys and have a great time. Well, I've never gone to a convention. I've never gone back to Korea. Now, I don't know why. I just have no strong feelings that I should. And yet friends of mine have said you should go, and I probably should. You would never recognize Seoul, and I understand that. But I never, I called several guys, and there was one guy out in Ohio that I called him up. God, he says, Jack, you're the one guy I wanted to find. I'm glad you called. His wife had died. I think he has died since that time. But we were so isolated from, I mean, I wasn't in the rifle company. I was closer with the commanding officer of it, and then I was only there overnight with him. And so I really never got into the conventions and all this other stuff. Now, several friends have tried to get me to go, and I mean,
so you didn't really have anyone to share it with.
Yeah, I felt the whole time, hey, I was no big deal. Let me tell you, I was just one of a zillion number of them. I was there.
But you played your part, and you.
I did what I had to do, and it was a part of in my life that I got out of it, so I was okay. And I didn't anything more than a lot of other people did.
Can I interrupt here, and I want to ask, is there any something that makes you feel that you don't want to talk about it, bad memory, or does that brings you more scars? That's why you didn't want to talk about it? What, could you really specify why you didn't want to talk about it?
Well, a lot of guys.
Sorry if my question is offensive.
No, that's fine. A lot of guys, when they go to they like to talk about the situations they were in, the shooting and the drinking and whatever else it is, and I never felt this way. I never felt that. I'm very proud of the fact that I have a Purple Heart. I have to admit that. Beyond that, hey, I don't get any joy out of telling someone how we killed a lot of people. War is bad. Everybody gets hurt somehow or other. I don't see any great value in drinking with the guys to talk about how lucky you were to get out of this or that. God helped me to get out of that. I see it that way, and I really don't see where it's anything to be so happened in my lifetime. I was saying earlier about Red Shawl, the guy that we were waiting to go aboard ship at Seoul to go around to go up to North Korea. And I'd seen Red Shawl. He's a red-headed guy, and he has a red handlebar mustache. And a number of years later, my daughter graduated from Geneseo, as did her now husband. And they had a wedding. And My son-in-law David came from Binghamton. And after I guess it was, I think it was the dinner we were having, and they were all over at our house, and there was this young guy there that was Pat Shaw. And I said to him, "You're from Binghamton?" He says, "Yes." I said, "Does your father have red hair?" And he says, "Yes." I said, "Does he have a handlebar?" "Yes." I said, "I know your father." And it turns out he, Pat Shaw, and my son-in-law were very good friends in high school and had known each other their whole lives. And it reconnected me with Red Shaw and his wife. Now, Red married a Japanese lady. Had an awful time doing it because at this time in our lives, Japan was still, what's the word, under the control of the United States. General MacArthur was treated like king over there because he put together everything and he set the rules, and he set their constitution, everything. And you could not marry a Japanese woman. Took Red 9 years. We were invited to their 50th anniversary. And this young lady, it was his bride. His first sergeant was there from back then. His wife's best friend came over from Japan to be at their 50th anniversary. He's a very good friend of mine. He and I both came very close to going to a convention, and we were sitting on the ground one day when, I don't know which one of us said it, but wouldn't it be great if we were on a hunting trip? And the other one said, "Let's get the heck out of here." But that just makes it a small world, doesn't it? And I've seen a number of Korean-run programs, and with no exception, we have always been treated with I've always felt, and I know that there's a very large Korean community in central New York. I never knew that. And to a person, they are forever indebted to us for what we did.
How does that make you feel that, there's this whole group of people that are recognizing the acts that you and your fellow Marines and American soldiers did over there to help their country?
Oh, hey, I'm so proud of the fact that I was there and saw them before.
Mm-hmm.
They have done wonders. They have done wonders. And I don't think there's a one of us that were in the war over there that wish they had twice as much the finance background. That they're the 12th or 13th largest financial country in the world. And it was a long road. And I think the thing that amazes me, and I think we're all very happy over, is the fact that these little orphans, they should know all this. They should know all that took place. Just like I said to somebody earlier, I said to Joe, I felt at times as if I was a Korean, because when I was 5 or 6 years old, my mother and father had split up. I had 4 older sisters, and my mother took in washings for us to survive. And it was a tough time. I moved down to a farm and lived on a farm for a number of years. And I went in the military, went through a war, came out, sat around for a couple weeks and got a job. And as time went on, I was able to move up the ladder as high as a vice president of a life insurance company. And I remember saying when I got that, I wish my mother could see me now, when the board of directors had voted me to be a vice president. I was very proud of that. Now, I didn't tell a lot of people that, but I said it because I know what she would have felt. And we've been very fortunate with my family and our kids and our grandchildren, and we've just been so lucky over the years. When we came back, it was no big deal. We just came back. World War II had been over. Vietnam had not started. There weren't that many of us that were coming back. I think that probably had a difference or two, because while there were a lot of people killed and wounded in Korea, it was not where there were 40 divisions over there. And so as we came back, it took a while for us to be aware that we were Korean War veterans. And that was something to be. That was I didn't know for a long time. I remember there were 3 of us that had gone to, in Syracuse, the American Legion. And one guy was a lawyer, and one guy was a stockbroker, and myself, and we gave up on it because all they did was go at the American Legion when it was downtown, and sit at the bar and drink beer, and none of us drank beer. So we thought that was a waste of time, so we kind of all went our way, and we didn't know who was and who wasn't. And unlike in later years, other wars, there's been a lot of politics to it. There was politics to this. I can remember Harry Truman, when he fired Douglas MacArthur, and he was probably right. I remember talking to a girl one time at church who had lost her father. He'd been a pilot. And I said to her, we prayed for guys like your father, because when the skies were up and they could fly, they protected us, because when they were in the air, the North Koreans or the Chinese or whoever couldn't show themselves too much because they were somebody up above. And that was true. And so it really never, I remember I got discharged. I went down to Quantico, and I was discharged, and came back to my mother's house in Cortland. And I sit around for about 2 weeks, and I got tired of not doing nothing, and so I went looking for a job and got lucky and found a job.
And you worked your way up?
And I worked my way up, that's true. And so life goes on. I think everyone who can back, everyone who's in the Korean War Veterans group right now has a story to tell. I think it may be different, but it's the same. And I think that's what you guys are going to find out in getting different people's opinion. I think this is going to be great, because you're going to find a wide range of theories about whether we should have or whether or not. I don't get involved in the politics of it. I was too young to know what politics were all about. I'm not sure I know about it even now, but in her case, we were having lunch one day, and she got crying over it, and she said, I said to her that they're collecting, what is it, something that you can find from a person, that the remains, what's the word I'm trying to think of, where they get some from a living people, and the chances of if they find the remains of someone who matches that, DNA. And they've had a number of them. And I think that this is one of the most important things that, personally I think that I've been to 3 funerals of young men coming back from Korea 50 years later. And I've talked to their families, I've talked to their sisters, and there was one just recently in the paper up at North Syracuse, a young corporal from North Syracuse that just came back. They found his remains. And I said to her, and she said, I have already given them DNA remains in the hopes that someday they'll find my father. Um,
So it helps put closure, I guess, on.
It did. It's true. We were in Utica. A young man came back, and they had lived in Utica a long time ago, but he was buried in the national in Washington. But they wanted to have an event in Utica because they had lived there as youngsters. And after there was probably 20 of us that were there. And afterwards, the VFW asked us to come over to this house and have lunch. So we went over, and we happened to be sitting across the table from his sister and her husband. And these people were coming up to her, glad to see them because they hadn't seen them in a long time. And I said to the husband, I said, what did you guys think when you got a phone call that after all these years, they found him? He says, we thought it was a joke. We thought somebody was trying to pull something on us. And I said, when did you find out you wasn't? Well, about 2 weeks after that, 2 or 3 people from the military, from Washington, called them to tell them they really did have the remains of this person. And I mean, it's amazing when you think of it. We went to one in Elmira, and they had a service, and we couldn't figure out when they were coming, and the priest said he would have been 80 years old today. Now we knew, and it was a pouring rain, and that place was packed, and here's this guy come back. He'd been dead 50 years, but he's a human being, and he deserves the respect to come back home. And the third one was out in North Syracuse, and the same thing. We had dinner with a Korean general and his family the night before. That was something too. I mean, all of a sudden we're back and and this guy had been found, and he came back. There was, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago, there was an article, was it in that or was it in I think it was in the paper. And we went up to North Syracuse to the cemetery. And there was a whole raft of us there. I mean, hey, you can't, I mean, think of it. How you find somebody like that after so many years?
So what's the legacy that Korean War veterans have? What are they going to leave behind on the United States, on us, on society?
I don't know. I would like to say that they would leave behind a common word. I don't think that'll happen because we're all different individuals. We go to a meeting and have 40 people there, and they're all different. They've all gone their own way. And the one thing that they have in the same is we all fought in the same war. I don't think there's any one thing they're going to accept that they took part in something that was one of the worst wars there ever was. There's no war that's any good, but this was a terrible one. And a lot of guys paid the price that we didn't have to pay. And beyond that, I don't know.
So I have one more question for you.
Okay.
You know, through this project, when a family member or someone is conducting research on the Korean War and they look you up, look at another veteran up to find out about their experiences, I'm wondering if you could maybe give them one message that they should learn about in life or regarding the Korean War and anything. Maybe if you could kind of.
I would hope, and I feel comfortable with this. I think that to a person, you interview someone who was in the Korean War. I think if you'll admit that he was there, you're going to find a person who is very sober on warfare. He didn't choose to go to Korea. He was in the military. But he went, and he did all he could do, and he was fortunate enough to come home. And beyond that, I don't know. But I think that they would all say they were very fortunate. They weren't the heroes, they were the guys that were lucky enough to come home. And that's how I feel about it. And I think it's a great thing you're doing, because you're going to get a lot of points of view and a lot of experiences that I'm certainly not aware of. But at the same time, someone 20 years from now is looking at this and studying this. They're going to find that the world is not as big as we used to think it was. And people do care about other people. I don't remember any hollering against our going to Korea. People were in trouble, and they happened to believe the same beliefs that we have. And for that, it was worth it. It'd be interesting when you get all through with all the things. It's going to be very interesting to. Yes, it will.
Mr. Allen, I really appreciate you coming and sitting next to us. And
Thank you.
it was really interesting to hear about your experiences. Before we invite your wife up,
Yeah.
we would have this medal, which is the Ambassador for Peace medal, given by
Oh my
the
gosh.
Korean government.
Yeah.
It's by the Ministry of Patriots and Veteran Affairs and the Korean Veterans Association.
Yeah.
And they have
Oh
this
my.
medal in your
Oh.
honor. And if you wouldn't mind, I could put this around your neck.
No. Go ahead. Wow, that's beautiful. Wow.
So they'd like to thank you, and we'd like to thank you for coming and speaking with us.
Thank you for having me. That's beautiful. Wow. Oh.